Thank you for inviting me to be with you today to mark Holocaust Memorial Day and the 75th anniversary of the publication of Anne Frank's diary.
It all started with a regal pronouncement, just a few lines of formal language concealed in a news release from Buckingham Palace. However, by sundown, that single pronouncement had sparked the largest royal outrage since Meghan and Harry's departure. Prince George, the eldest son of Prince William and Kate Middleton, and the late Princess Diana's grandchild, had just received a new royal title, one traditionally reserved for the monarchy's future generations. Despite being young, this gesture was more than symbolic. It was a signal, a declaration, a quiet coronation of sorts. Inside the palace, however, there were no cheers. Queen Camilla was once again faced with a sad royal reality. Not only had her biological family been excluded from the inner circle of succession, but her cherished grandson, who was widely expected to receive a ceremonial appointment or honorary status, had been utterly overlooked, and in his place, Diana's grandson. Camilla was concerned with more than simply the title. It was about everything it symbolized: legacy, acceptance, power. Above all, there was the age-old tension that had troubled her from the start: Diana's shadow. Behind the royal walls, rumors of a violent clash began to circulate. Of yelling bouts, several doors slammed, Camilla seeking answers from a king who appeared more distant than ever. And as the media became aware of it, the firestorm spread. The headlines screamed betrayal. Social media erupted with memes and fury. One narrative became impossible to ignore. Prince George has been chosen. Camilla's grandson had been eliminated. Is this a purposeful effort by Prince William to honor his mother's legacy? A subliminal hint from King Charles that Diana's bloodline was always going to triumph? Or is it simply a planned move by the monarchy to ensure its future with the most popular and prepared face of the next generation? Whatever the reason, the consequences were immediate. And in the thick of it all, as is so frequently the case, two women's legacies clashed silently. Diana, Camilla too. This wasn't simply a title. The line was drawn in royal gold. On one side stood the future monarch. On the other hand, a vengeful queen consort with everything to lose. Welcome to the royal struggle behind the throne, where Camilla went insane after Prince George was crowned with the future that was never supposed to be his. It occurred on a crisp spring morning, the kind of day when the skies over London appeared uncommonly clear, as if the heavens themselves were taking notice. Buckingham Palace published a simple, concise, and somewhat understated statement announcing that Prince George had been granted the honorary title of Duke of Cambridge and Rothesay, resurrecting the dual tradition of English and Scottish distinction. Though mostly ceremonial at the time, the ramifications were clear. Prince George was officially positioned as the next king in everything but name. While many royal observers predicted that such honors would lay dormant until Prince William's eventual ascension, insiders today believe the early investiture was planned, precise, and meaningful. It was a planned maneuver, indicating not only George's position in the line of succession, but also his enhanced status within the family's inner workings. This was more than just a nod to protocol. It was a clear announcement for the nation. This is the face of the monarchy's future. This is Diana's legacy. This is your next king. According to palace sources, the decision was reached after months of private discussions between King Charles, Prince William, and top Privy Council advisors. There were reports that Queen Elizabeth herself had previously indicated a desire for George to take on his role early, as a method of restoring continuity and serenity after years of royal turmoil. But beneath the gentle rhetoric of duty and tradition lies a maelstrom of emotional conflict. Camilla Parker Bowles, now Queen Consort, had long wished to have her own family acknowledged. Her grandson, Freddie Parker Bowles, had joined her to several low-profile events in recent years. She had made no secret of her intention to see him integrated into the monarchy's public image in some honorary position. However, Freddie was not mentioned in the announcement. No little salutation, symbolic nod, or delicate gesture of inclusion. George, and only George, was in the spotlight. Kate Middleton, as dignified as ever, chose to remain mute in public. However, images from the day show her beaming with pride, her hand tenderly placed on George's shoulder as he stood beside her in formal clothes, the weight of a future crown beginning to settle on his youthful frame. The public loved the image. Commentators referred to it as the dawn of a new golden era, and the press praised George as king in waiting, crowned in the court of hearts. For Prince William, this was a personal matter. A source close to the heir stated, "William has always believed in getting George ready early, but this wasn't just about tradition. It was about demonstrating to the country that the monarchy has a future, and that future includes Diana's blood." The statement resonated across the Atlantic and around the world. Foreign media portrayed it as a bold, strategic pivot by the House of Windsor. But within Clarence House, a tempest was already developing. Camilla, surprised and enraged, interpreted the title as a personal snub, a warning that her family would never truly belong. According to an insider, she allegedly told aides, "They have obliterated my family yet again, after all I've done." But while Camilla raged, George soars. The 9-year-old prince's public appearances have progressively grown over the last year, and this latest development cements his rising profile. He is no longer the quiet young royal in the background. He is being sculpted, groomed, and promoted. And now, with a title that restores past status, he is taking on a position that was previously only spoken about. A royal historian observed, "The title is more than an honor. It is a declaration. It clearly communicates to the world that George is more than just the future. He is the present's priority." While the globe celebrated George's impending coronation in spirit, not everyone inside the palace applauded. Because for one lady who fought for decades to be where she is, this was more than simply a name. It was about being reminded that bloodlines are important, and hers would never be considered regal enough. Not for the crown, not for history, and definitely not for Diana's son. Behind the regal smiles and polished press briefings, the atmosphere within Clarence House became icy frigid. The public may have applauded Prince George's new title as a delightful royal custom, but Queen Camilla saw it as a personal slap in the face. And worse, it was delivered to her grandchild rather than her directly. Camilla's reaction was quick and visceral, according to those who knew her best. When she heard the title announcement, she rushed out of a scheduled meeting, reportedly screaming under her breath, "Of course they'd do this behind my back!" However, it wasn't simply about being excluded from the decision. Who was left out sent her into a spiral. Camilla had quietly pushed for her grandkids for many years, particularly Freddie Parker Bowles, her youngest grandson from her son Tom. Despite his lack of royal lineage, Freddie had gradually been brought to the outskirts of royal life, attending church with the family, appearing at garden parties, and even accompanying Camilla to charity events are all subtle but intentional steps to bring him closer to royal exposure. And yet, with the stroke of a pen and a carefully worded palace announcement, Prince George had just been given a title steeped in history, while Freddie remained unnamed, titleless, and unseen. One insider claimed Camilla snapped in private, shrieking at Charles, "They embarrassed my grandchild! You let them trample on my bloodline as if it meant nothing! Freddie has done nothing wrong. He just isn't Diana's grandchild." The mention of Diana allegedly shattered the king's quiet, but instead of consolation, Charles responded with a tired detachment, either due to guilt, exhaustion, or both. He simply stated, "It was always going to be George. We owe it to the queue." Witnesses claim that a single line sent Camilla over the edge. She is believed to have hurled a crystal decanter against the wall in fury, smashing it next to a painting of the late queen. Staff were promptly dismissed from the room, but not before hearing her state with frigid precision, "They will never let me forget I am not her. Never." That her was not Kate. It was not even the queen. It was Diana. Because no matter how many public smiles Camilla has given, how many obligations she has performed, or how many years she has worn the crown beside Charles, Diana's legacy lingers like smoke in every royal corridor. And with George, Diana's grandson, being publicly elevated over Camilla's own blood, the message couldn't be more clear. The past still governs the present. The people still adore Diana, and her legacy continues to determine who wins the crown. The rest of the family's quiet aggravated the hurt. Neither William nor Kate had informed Camilla about the announcement. Neither had Charles, despite understanding how delicate the situation was. It was as if Camilla's chapter in royal history was silently turning and closing. And for a woman who had spent decades pushing her way into the royal spotlight, to see her own family neglected in favor of a kid descended from the woman she had previously competed with in quiet, the betrayal was excruciating. She did not want her grandson to become king. She simply didn't want him to be forgotten. And now, to her horror, he is. Erased, replaced. Worse, Diana's blood overshadowed them. Before her death, Queen Elizabeth II was famed for her keen intuition and unwavering devotion to the crown. But within palace gates, those who genuinely knew her whispered of a deeper, more emotional foresight, one that recognized the significance of heritage rather than just bloodline. Her Majesty recognized Diana as the embodiment of that legacy. Despite their complex and sometimes difficult relationship, the Queen and Princess Diana shared a silent respect. Elizabeth recognized Diana's significance in a way that the rest of the family frequently chose to ignore. Diana was not only a royal consort, she symbolized the people's hearts. A woman who revolutionized the concept of royalty, not via rituals or bloodlines, but through compassion, warmth, and honesty. In her latter years, the Queen reportedly became more thoughtful, not only about her personal legacy, but also about what the monarchy will be like after her. According to insiders, she frequently discussed the need to evolve, adapt, and ensure that the crown's destiny was carried out by individuals who had the people's trust. According to those closest to her, it was during these deliberations that she came to a silent resolution. Diana's bloodline must be protected, not for sentiment, but for survival. A trusted former aide described an offhand comment made by the Queen over a private tea. "The monarchy cannot afford to lose the people's affection again. If people see Diana's eyes on the next queen, they will never look away." This emotion would later affect important decisions. Initially, subtle gestures were made, such as asking George to more high-profile royal responsibilities, favoring Kate and William in public appearances, and even granting direct press access to the young Cambridge children while sheltering Camilla's extended family from similar scrutiny. The Queen's private chats with Charles, however, revealed the most about her quiet intentions. Upon a rumored conversation just months before her death, the Queen allegedly warned him, "You may reign, but the future rests in her son's son." The message was clear. Prince George was more than just a name. He was the crown's insurance policy, the personification of the link between obligation and public affection, between the old monarchy and a softer, more popular new one. Camilla found this image terrible, because no matter how much she gave, her loyalty, her presence, or her silence, the Queen had made her decision long before. This has nothing to do with her grandchild, or even her. It was always about Diana. Prince George was not chosen just for his position in the family tree. He was chosen for what and who he reminded the world of. A mother was taken away far too soon, a princess who never wore the crown. The monarchy could not risk deleting its legacy, so even in death, the queen assured that Diana's light would never extinguish. She could not crown Diana. However, she could ensure Diana's blood wore the crown. And in doing so, she established the most defining royal line of all, between heritage and heart, between Camilla's grandson and Diana's. The people had made their decision long ago. Finally, so had the monarchy. As Camilla's rage shook the palace walls and the people celebrated Prince George's new honor, one voice was conspicuously absent from the storm: King Charles himself. After decades of working for Camilla's acceptance and position as queen consort, the man's silence was deafening. And some who know the royal family's inner workings believe it was not an accident. It was calculated, painful, and incredibly personal. According to those close to the king, he was split between two loyalties: his love for the woman he lost and her legacy. When the decision was made to give George the ceremonial title of Prince of Wales in waiting, a symbolic act that put him firmly in the line of regal prominence, Charles reportedly signed off without saying anything. Not because he wasn't concerned, but he understood that speaking would simply exacerbate the divide between his wife and the crown, between the past and the future. Multiple palace aides described Charles becoming increasingly quiet since the Queen's death. Her shadow continues to loom big over every move he takes, and he knows in his heart that public feeling remains tethered to Diana, even after all these years. Charles was well aware that identifying George as an official heir in training would be seen as a tribute to Diana's ongoing influence. Nevertheless, he allowed it. I approved of it. Even encouraged William to continue. One source reported a terrifying incident after Camilla approached him with the title. She implored him to talk. She said, "You are the king now. If you do not safeguard our family, who will?" He just looked at her, as if he had already accepted defeat before the argument even started. Because Charles knows Diana won, a fact he has never publicly stated. Not married, not for survival, but in spirit, in love with the people, in the face of their grandson. Diana personified the concept of monarchy revived through compassion and empathy, something Camilla was not allowed to do. Despite Charles's best efforts to rebuild Camilla's reputation, he realized this moment was irreversible. The world could not be convinced that Freddie Parker Bowles could sit alongside George in the same breath of royal succession. No whirling of the optics, no rewriting history. So he chose silence. It was his only protection, his only means of control, a clever way to step back while still allowing the machine to continue forward. A quiet acceptance that his rule would always be under the shadow of his mother and first wife. It appears that the weight of the crown rests not only on the head that wears it, but also on the heart that carries its contradictions. Charles did not speak since he had nothing further to say, not to Camilla, not for the nation. He'd already spoken everything by allowing Prince George to rise and letting Diana's legacy shine, even if it meant leaving his own family in the dark. When the official announcement was made that Prince George had been bestowed a senior royal title normally reserved for much older heirs, the public reacted quickly, explosively, and overwhelmingly one-sided. It was more than just news for Britain and the Commonwealth. It was a proclamation. Many believed Prince George was more than just a future monarch, but a ruler in waiting with millions of ardent followers. And while royal custom frequently sparks disagreement, this time the people were united. Social media exploded with words of support and pride. Hashtags like #Diana's Legacy, #Future King George, and #The Real Heir became popular within hours. Even more telling, the hush around Camilla's grandson, Freddie Parker Bowles, was just as loud. There was no protest about him being passed over. There was no commotion over his exclusion, because he was never in the public eye in the first place. One royal observer stated it clearly in a now viral post. "It's not about bloodlines. This is about belonging. Diana owns George, to William, to Kate, to us. Camilla owns Freddie, and no one asked for her dynasty." The sentiment was shared in taverns, parlors, schools, and newsrooms. For a nation battered by years of scandal, Meghan and Harry's explosive exit, Prince Andrew's humiliation, and the public's growing distrust of the monarchy, Prince George represented a fresh start, a link between the monarchy's earliest traditions and its most cherished symbol, Princess Diana. Older generations noticed in him William's composure and his grandmother's spark. Younger viewers saw a boy born into duty but raised in love, a child of warm humanity rather than frigid protocol. And what about Kate Middleton? The British people made it clear. Her contribution to this moment was significant. In many eyes, she had accomplished something no one else in the firm had, making royalty feel relatable again. Newspaper headlines in the UK adopted a definite tone. George, the people's heir. The Daily Mirror. Windsor's New Hope has Diana's smile. The Times. Queen Camilla silenced as public crowns George in their hearts. The Sun, Sept. 7, 2017. However, not everyone was celebrating. In certain aristocratic circles linked to Camilla's ancestry, hostility grew stronger. One anonymous person in Camilla's broad social circle reportedly informed a columnist, "They've constructed a myth about George that Freddie could never live up to. It's unfair." However, the bulk of the country seems unfazed. They maintained that fairness had little bearing on the situation. This was about heritage, not preferences. When it came down to the child of Diana's son versus the grandchild of the lady who replaced her, the emotional scales shifted one way, and quickly. Prince George was not just given a higher title, he had an exalted spirit. In the eyes of the public, he became a living image of what the monarchy could be, not tainted by scandal, not diluted by ambition, but founded on empathy, legacy, and love. And what type of legitimacy? No official edict may award it, and no other title can compete. As one commentator described it brilliantly, Freddie may carry Camilla's name, but George carries Diana's brightness. In this country, that is still important. In a castle established on centuries of hierarchy and bloodline, a child's title destroyed the delicate image of togetherness. Prince George's elevation was more than just a ceremonial nod. It was a thunderclap across the monarchy's foundation, reverberating throughout Britain and beyond. Camilla considered it the ultimate insult, the most powerful message conveyed without using a single word. Your legacy stops with you. Her grandson, previously whispered about in halls of power, was now definitely excluded from the royal succession. And having spent years working her way into royal acceptance, first as mistress, then as wife, and finally as queen consort, it was evident that no title could shield her dynasty from extinction. In contrast, George rises with the weight of history behind him. He wears more than just the promise of kingship. He wears the affection of a people still mourning Diana and yearning for a monarch who embodies not only tradition but also humanity. The crown seeks salvation via him. Diana continues to live through him. And King Charles? His silence cemented it. His silent ascent signaled to the world that legacy had prevailed over love, and the monarchy's destiny was no longer up for question. It belonged to George, to Diana's grandson, to the House of Windsor's most emotionally powerful heir. This wasn't simply a family drama. It was a public expression of sentiment, a shift in the moral throne, if not the formal one. As Camilla falls out of favor and her grandchild fades into the background, Prince George strides forward towards his destiny, not with arrogance, but with the quiet, rising strength of a youngster who has already met millions of people's expectations. The title was given, a dynasty was declared. And in that moment, a new era of royal authority began, not with a boom, but with a kid reared on the tradition of a queen who never wore the crown. Diana is no longer with us, yet her voice lives on. And now it talks via George. The people have heard it, and the monarchy, whether they confess it or not, has listened.